Hi, welcome back, guys. This is your friend, WTFW, with another fiction. What if Deku defending UA? From Widowmaker. Now, before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now, let's get into the fanfic. Sirens blared loudly through the streets of Tokyo as fires raged on in the upper floors of apartment buildings. Bystanders down below watched on as policemen and firemen were quickly hurrying, escorting people out of the burning edifice, with fire trucks extending their ladders so that the hoses could reach as high as the flames. Damn it! One officer cursed out of frustration below as he saw that the fire was barely starting to get put out. Where are the pros right now? He yelled in question to his comrades. They're still trying to track down the arsonists who got this place. One shouted back as he was pinning a man against the hood of a police car, having his hands behind his back before cuffing them. But we could really use someone to put those fires out if we want to get to the people there, he admitted, grimacing a little. Up there, one woman exclaimed, catching their attentions as they gasped to see a young lady upon one of the upper floors just below the fire, holding a baby wrapped in a light green blanket in her arms as she looked to be the verge of tears. Crap, an officer yelped in realization. Get one of those ladders over to her now, he demanded quickly. They won't make it, another yelled in realization, cringing in fright. The girl herself tried to remain calm, shivering in fright as she glanced back through the glass door to see that the flames had reached her apartment, followed by an explosion that blew by her off the balcony. She screamed as she began plummeting to the earth below, holding the infant close to her as he was bawling loudly. All of a sudden, though, a figure leapt in and caught her, landing safely upon the ground beside the police cars. The officers all beamed delightedly upon seeing the distinct muscular figure and bangs of the one who had saved her. Everything will be all right now, miss, he reassured as she opened her eyes and gasped, seeing that it was indeed All Might. Because I am here, he stated with his trademark smile. The crowd beyond the building cheered excitedly at the sight of the number one hero, while the public safety workers sighed in relief at the rescue. Make that why we're here, All Might, a voice cried out, catching the pro's attention as he looked to see other heroes, such as Kamui Woods and Backdraft, arriving on the scene. Are there any others up there? The former of the two that had arrived asked immediately. Not sure just yet, the blonde-haired man responded as he looked to see that the firemen were getting closer to putting out the flames. Backdraft, help those men put out the fire, he advised to the fireman-like hero, who nodded as he went off to one of the fire trucks. Kamui, you and I'll escort anyone out that's still in there, he said to the masked man beside him. Right, he concurred with a thumbs up, extending his wooded right arm out to latch onto a balcony of the edifice, pulling himself up to reach the middle levels. Wait, one officer shouted, causing the muscular man to halt himself from following his companion. What about the arsonists? He asked loudly over the other sounds around the area. Not to worry, he responded as he looked up to see the Arbor Quirk user forming a makeshift slide with his right arm as people were gathered around him, waiting to get down. He'll take care of the last few, he affirmed confidently. He? The policeman stammered in question, wondering who exactly he was referring to. Elsewhere in the city, two men had been knocked out cold as smoke emitted from their bodies while lying against a wall in an alley. In front of them was Endeavor, who scoffed in disgust. These punks could have at least given me a fight, he muttered, looking out at the street at the other end of the alley. Now where's the last one? He questioned as he narrowed his eyes. A man was frantically running amidst the crowds of people walking the sidewalks, even shoving some aside. Move, move, he shouted repeatedly, as if he had a weapon in his hands. He did not realize that he was being observed from above by a certain woman with what appeared to be a sniper rifle. She had a long black ponytail and a recon visor that resembled a spider's eyes as it came over her face. Her skin-tight violet suit that exposed her cleavage was also equipped with black metal boots with spikes upon the sides of the soles, a holster around her right thigh, a grappling hook launcher upon her left arm, which had a pair of spikes upon it as well, and a pair of black gloves over her hands. Her skin was a cold blue with a tattoo upon her right arm. Read as Cockamer as she took a ready position at the ledge of the building she was upon, looking through the scope of her armament to see the frantic man heading into an alley. "There you are," she uttered as she set her right index finger upon the trigger, pushing it back. The sound of a bang echoed, causing numerous amounts of people to halt upon hearing it. "Og!" A voice screamed in agony, catching the attentions of several people as they looked into the alley to see that the man who was running had been shot in the right leg, bleeding profusely as he attempted to crawl away. "Stand aside, now!" A familiar voice boomed, making the bystanders move for Endeavor as he walked into the alley to see what had happened. "Help me," he stuttered as his eyes were in tears, looking back to see the professional hero standing there with a disgruntled expression upon his face. "So the widow strikes again," he muttered, glancing up at the rooftops of nearby buildings to try and spot something. The sniper herself used her grappling hook to come down from the roof into a dark alley, placing her weapon onto her back as its barrel shifted into that of an assault rifle. "You're welcome, Tashinori," she said in a French accent, taking out an MPG from her holster and activating it. After pressing a few icons upon the holographic screen that had appeared, a green portal opened up beside her, allowing for her to walk through it and disappear. The vortex vanished seconds later as well. Back at the apartment complex, the flames had finally been put out as backdraft and the firemen came down from the extended ladders, and everyone who was inside at the time had safely been gotten out. "Job well done, it seems," All Might noted with his hands at his hips. He then took notice of the Hellflame quirk user approaching the group with the 3 arsonists he had apprehended over his right shoulder. "You took your sweet time," he grumbled, throwing the 3 men down onto the ground in front of the police officers. "Good work, Todoroki," the number 1 hero complimented as he shot the man with a flaming beard a thumbs up. However, he took notice of the bleeding leg of the one arsonist, arching an eyebrow. "Hey, what happened to him?" the Arbor quirk user asked as he came down from the building, reforming his right arm. "Take a wild guess," Endeavor retorted as a response, confusing him and the others as they tilted their heads. The muscular man knelt down and examined the arsonist's wound, letting off a small grin. "Widowmaker, right?" he guessed, catching their attentions. "Glad to know she's helping us out every now and then," he noted with a hearty chuckle. "Right," the Hellflame quirk user muttered in response as he rolled his eyes. "You and your Omniforce friends sure know how to take the fun out of a chase," he pointed out, sounding disgruntled. "Hey, that's fine," Kamui chimed in. "Thanks to the Omni Pact, they get to legally provide assistance for us without so much as reaping benefits from a hero agency," he explained while placing his hands at his hips. "So long as it makes the job easier on us," Backdraft added as he approached the group. "Well said," All Might agreed, smiling still as he looked up at the bright blue sky littered with clouds, including the smoke that still emerged from the burnt building. Episode I Part I. 13 years later. "Now who can tell me the names of all 10 Omniforce squadron leaders?" Midnight asked the students of Class 1A. It had been almost a month since the incident against the 8 precepts of death and their leader, Chisaki. Since that time, things seemed to be relatively normal, but were different because of how some people were feeling. Izuku Midoriya was one of those people who gone through a lot during the raid on the enemy's base during his internship. While the rescue was successful, his peer had lost his quirk, his employer was dead as a result of the mission, and he and his mentor's relationship was growing further apart. Even so, he still had to smile because of how important it was for them complete the foreboding task. He raised his crooked right hand lined with scars, while just a few other classmates of his raised theirs. "Midoriya," the teacher said, awaiting an answer. "Ben Tennyson, Sunset Shimmer, Trafalgar Law, Urza Scarlet, Garazio Long, Ruby Rose, All Might, Mercy, Goku," he listed off, pausing for a moment to make sure he knew the last one. "And Rose Quartz," he finished with a grin. Correct, the somnambulist quirk user replied, sounding impressed. Could you tell me which ones are no longer in those roles? She questioned, causing him to blink in surprise. Well, Rose Quartz disappeared over 12 years ago, he stated as the others listened. And All Might is, well, he tried to continue, appearing to be reluctant to say what was the truth. Right again, Midoriya, Midnight responded. Going back to the interactive chalkboard and pressing a button on a remote, she had to pull up the names of those associated with the Omniforce. Man, Midoriya knows pretty much everything about these guys. Denki Kaminari whispered behind himself to those near him. I don't blame him for that, Ijiro Kirishima noted in reply. All Might's a part of this group, he mentioned. And you know how psyched he gets about All Might, he added jokingly. Having overheard the conversation, Izuku blushed a little in embarrassment. Now who can name a member of All Might's squadron off the top of their head? The history teacher inquired, immediately getting quite a few students to raise their hands. Dragneel, she said to the girl sitting right behind the freckled teen. My mom, Lucy Hartfilia, she answered, smiling cheekily. The one in front of her grinned at her enthusiasm. She too was with the group on the day of the rescue and had changed as well since. Her hair that was normally set in either a sideways ponytail or pigtails like her parent was now let down. It was about as messy as her father's own hair, but was only spiky at the top as it framed her face well without bangs. Right again, the somnambulist quirk user replied, making Natalie chuckle happily. Though I suppose I should have someone else that isn't a Omni-Force member's child be answering all these questions, she admitted sheepishly as she placed a finger onto her lips. Anyone else? She questioned. Yoko Littner, Minoru Mineta suddenly shouted out as he slammed his left hand against the table, blushing an excited red as the girl in front of him shivered in surprise. Randy Cunningham's one of them, right? Hantasiro guessed, sounding somewhat unsure. There's that alchemist guy. Mina Ashido chimed in with her head placed against her right hand as she was glancing up in thought. Edward, Eric, she inquired nervously. Rock Lee, Tenya Ada exclaimed as he sharply raised his right arm. Sora, Katsuki Bakugo muttered, appearing to be bored with the lecture. Is Finn one of them? Toru Hagakure questioned curiously. There's also Sonic and Simon, too, Tsuyu Asui mentioned as she put her index finger up against her right cheek. So the last one is, Ochako Uraraka tried to guess, rubbing the back of her head nervously. Asuna? She inquired. That's incorrect, Midnight stated in response, causing the pink-cheeked girl to slump down in her seat in defeat. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this person, she began as everyone listened on carefully. But the last member of the list is Widowmaker, she stated, causing some people to gasp in surprise, while others remained stoic. Whoa, are you serious? Mashirawa Jiro questioned, evidently shocked by the detail. It's true, the teacher replied with a nod. Before it was discovered that she was a rogue agent that not only tried to infiltrate the task force of her home world known as Overwatch, she began to explain. She had been recruited by All Might to be the 68th member of the Omniforce, she told the class. 7 years ago, however, her true intentions came to light as she attempted to assassinate All Might, she mentioned, making some of the students widen their eyes in complete astonishment. Even Izuku seemed astonished by the revelation, although he did know that it had happened. So, where is she now? The zero-gravity quirk user asked curiously out of concern. That's what the Omniforce would like to know, Alice Fullbuster chimed in as a response, causing the majority of the classroom to glance over at her. Since word of her going rogue became known to them, she shut off location tracking on her MPG, she explained. Even if there was some way you could find her, she could get away pretty easily and be virtually impossible to find again, she mentioned as everyone seemed quite stunned, even the somnambulist quirk user. That is very true, she agreed before letting out a small breath of air. For next class, you'll be taking a quiz on the Omniforce and will have to list all 100 of its members in order, she told her students, as some paled in fright at the prospect. In addition, there will be an extra credit point given out to any of you that can explain the Omni Pact legislation put into place 15 years ago, she added, taking a deep breath of air. All right, you're dismissed, she finished, stepping down from the class podium and sliding the large door open to exit the room. Wow, Denki uttered afterwards, leaning back in his seat. This test is going to be brutal, he complained, holding his head in both of his hands. It's a quiz, dummy, Kyoka Gyro retorted, while twirling her right earphone jack in her fingers. And besides, you only have to list the names of the Omniforce members, she added. In order, Mina screamed out frantically. It's bad enough that we have to know the names of those guys, she mentioned, rubbing her fingers through her hair roughly. We can all study together tonight if you want, Momo Yayurazu offered from the back of the room, catching their attentions. Yeah, Momo, they exclaimed delightedly together, knowing that she would be a great tutor for them. I'll join it, too, Ochako concurred. After that little mess up back there, I'm not feeling too confident, she admitted sheepishly as she blushed. Well, we can all meet up in the lounge tonight and study, the class deputy declared, grinning happily. Sounds like I should go with her for a change, Ijiro admitted as he saw several people getting up to talk with the creation quirk user. You want to join it, Bakugo? He questioned to the spiky-haired teen. Pass, he replied, leaning back in his seat and putting his feet upon his desk. I can get all those names down no problem, he stated confidently. Would you take your feet off the desk? Tenya demanded angrily as he instantly stood up. As conversations were happening all around him, Izuku remained silent as he thought about the infamous assassin that was a member of All Might's squadron. After a quick class of modern literature with Cementos, everyone went off to the cafeteria for lunch. Deku, Natalie cried out, catching the freckled teen's attention as she suddenly embraced him from behind in the hallway. You feelin' psyched about acing Midnight's quiz tomorrow? She asked excitedly. Hey Natalie, he stuttered in greeting, blushing a bright red before being let go. I guess I am pretty confident that I'll breeze through it, he confessed. You mean we'll breeze through it, silly? The Dragon Slayer corrected, playfully punching his left arm as he chuckled a little. I feel like a lot's changed since that internship, she admitted, glancing through the windows to see the bright blue sky. Yeah, her messy-haired friend agreed, stopping to look with her. He then caught a glimpse of Rhea Dashley Tennyson and Rachel Hagane walking by them, holding hands. In fact, that's the greatest one, he pointed out, causing the pink-haired girl to look over and see the couple heading towards the cafeteria. Oh, yeah, she agreed with a light grin. Both of them knew that the pair, especially the equestrian magic user, had gone through quite a lot with their relationship recently. After feeling as if her girlfriend had been the one to protect her after all this time, the half-rainbow-haired girl had wanted to take on an internship with one of the famed upperclassmen, known as the Big Three. She interned alongside Izuku under the #1 hero's former sidekick, Sir Nightai, and wound up involved in the rescue mission at the 8 Precepts of Death's headquarters. There were several instances where she could have died, risking her own life to save one little girl from the clutches of someone so dastardly and insane. All the while, the Requip user never knew about it until the next day, seeing her girlfriend's minor injuries from such a conflict then. Though she cried at the thought of potentially losing her, she was relieved to see her alive and well. By then, her beloved felt the same as well, and was more confident to be open about their relationship going into the future. Seeing them walking together brought a smile to their freckled friend's face. But it soon vanished as he saw someone going past them. It was the skinny figure of All Might himself, donning a suit over his form as his blonde hair was quite disheveled. All Might, his successor uttered, shaking a little. A memory flew into his mind at that moment, as he had offered to give up the power that his mentor had bestowed upon him to one he thought was more worthy of it. Even his employer had stated that the upperclassman should have been the one to inherit one for all, but it was not meant to be as fate had intervened. Since the day of the rescue and his sidekick's death, All Might had not formally spoken with the student. Maybe it was grief that prevented him from talking. But he overheard the conversation in the hospital between the boy and his peer, which made things all the more difficult. He looked over to see him, noticing the small beads of sweat trickling down from his head before walking onwards. "Oh, was that weird?" Natalie asked, somewhat perplexed by the lack of interaction. "Huh," Izuku sighed deeply. "We should go and eat," he advised, trotting off in the opposite direction. The Dragon Slayer blinked in surprise, worriedly glancing back at the former pro before going after her friend. X. After lunch and a few more classes, the WANA students all went back to their dorms for the evening. Most of them bathed and ate dinner quickly before getting together in the lounge for the study session with Momo, while others took their time and studied beforehand, and then went to do the other things they needed to for the evening. The freckled teen had just finished taking a shower, donning only his pajama pants as he had forgotten his white t-shirt. His towel was draped over his shoulders as he brushed his teeth gently by the sink, staring into the mirror to see his reflection. "Did All Might know what I told Mirio?" he asked himself, trying to shake away the thought that his mentor was upset with him. "Name the 48th member of the Omni Force." The creation quirk user yelled in the lounge with her hair down as a Choco, Hanta, Denki, Mina, Kyoka, Minoru, Toru, Ijiro, Meshirao, Rakido Sato, Koji Koda, Yuga Aoyama, Mizo Shoji, Fumikage Tokoyami, Rhea, Rachel, and Alice all had small whiteboards in their hands with dry erase markers, all dressed for the evening. Even the Dragneel girl was among them, wanting to help out her friends who were struggling to figure out which members were which. Everyone wrote down a potential answer, with some looking more nervous than others to reveal what they thought was correct. "I got it," the hardening quirk user exclaimed aloud, raising his right hand quickly before putting up his board for everyone else to see. "It's Yang Xiaolong, right?" he inquired. "Correct," the class deputy responded with a smile. "Yes," he said excitedly as he pumped his fist. Some of the others were just as happy as he was, while the rest groaned in frustration. "I totally thought it was Jenny Wakeman." The invisible girl donning the tank top and sweatpants with slippers yelled, using an eraser to wipe away her wrong answer. "Oh, this quiz is so not going to go well," the zero-gravity quirk user complained, erasing her board. Now, Momo repeated in a placating manner. "We're all learning here and are here to help each other," she pointed out reassuringly. "Besides, this is easy," Minoru commented in a gloating tone. "I can't believe you guys can't get one girl's name right," he mocked, causing a tick mark to appear upon Denki's head, while some of the others glared at him. However, the class deputy smirked as she appeared to have a plan up her sleeve. "Who is member number 32? She asked, making him suddenly pale in realization. "Crap," he uttered. "White Chase Smoker," Hanta screamed excitedly as he held up his board. "That was right in my ear." The pop-off quirk user shouted back at him as he held his head in his hands, starting an argument as Katsuki was walking by, donning a black t-shirt with a skull insignia and a pair of sweatpants. "Now that I think about it," Ijiro began to chime in, catching the group's attention. "Doesn't Bakugo kinda remind you of Yang Xiaolong?" he inquired, causing the explosion quirk user to come to an immediate stop. "Huh?" he uttered with an arched eyebrow, glancing back at the ensemble of his classmates. "Oh, yeah," Rakido agreed. "They get angry, have great combat skills, and even have blonde hair," he listed off. "My hair's not as blonde as hers," the spiky-haired teen chimed in, catching their attentions as they saw him there. "But you sure act like her," Kyoka admitted, placing her hand onto her left cheek. "I wonder why that is," she inquired, making him blink in surprise. Alice took immediate notice of his reaction, letting off a grin. "If I didn't know any better, Katsuki," she began to make him perk up. "I'd say you have a crush on her," she remarked. He instantly blushed a mad red, gritting his teeth. "That's a lie," he stammered out angrily, clenching his fists. Unfortunately, it didn't seem as if many of them believed him once they burst out into laughter. Who would have thought Bakugo of all people would have a crush on someone? Ijiro mentioned, still chuckling. Oh yeah, the explosion quirk user bellowed, putting his hand onto the sofa. And what about you and the metal claw chick? He inquired in a snarky yet enraged tone. Whoa, there's nothing going between me and Laura, his friend argued, holding up his hands in a placating manner. I mean, we interned together, but that was it. He pointed out with a small tint of pink on his cheeks. TCH, Katsuki scoffed, frustrated with being teased. How's the studying going? Izuku asked, catching their attentions as they saw him walk into the room. Some of the girls' faces went red the moment they realized he was shirtless, especially Ochako and Natalie. It's going well, all things considered, Momo answered, scooching over to give him room to sit beside her on the couch. How about yourself? She asked. We all know the damn answer to that one, Denki pointed out, sounding disgruntled. Kyoka just groaned at him and rolled her eyes. If you need some help, I could give you guys some tips on how to remember them all, the freckled teen offered. Thanks, Deku. The zero-gravity quirk user stuttered in gratitude, pulling out her notebook to look over the list she made. But I think we're good, she reassured nervously, trying to keep her eyes off of him. Maybe talking one of the members more might help us focus, Mashiro suggested as an idea, having his arms folded behind his head. Oh, like that widowmaker lady, Toru chimed in, causing the messy-haired boy to perk up slightly. Yeah, that's been bothering me for a while since Midnight's class, Mina admitted while putting her hands onto her cheeks. What would have made an Omniforce member turn out that way? She questioned, causing everyone to perk up. I don't think it's as simple as her switching sides, Izuku responded to get their attentions. What do you mean by that? Ijiro asked, arching an eyebrow. Well, according to the news updates that came out, the freckled teen began. Widowmaker was really a double agent, or a sleeper agent for this group opposing Overwatch, he explained, sounding somewhat reluctant to talk about it. I can vouch for that, Alice chimed in. My father and other Omniforce members investigated this so-called group of mercenaries who were committing terror acts all across the globe, she told her classmates. And the name of that group was Talon, right? Rachel inquired, chiming into the conversation as she was holding Rhea close to herself in both of her arms. Yeah, the Ice and Water Wizard answered. So the Omniforce and Overwatch couldn't do anything to put a stop to her, Rikito guessed, stunned by the information. They had no way of keeping track of her, remember? Toru chimed in loudly. And like Fullbuster said, she could get away easily with that untraceable MPG of hers, she pointed out. That's why she's dangerous and needs to be stopped, Katsuki added, causing everyone to perk up as they were surprised to hear him join in on the conversation. It doesn't matter if she was an Overwatch agent, an Omniforce member, or even something else, he listed off. She stepped out of line, so she needs to get put down, he stated, walking off in a huff afterwards. Kaken, Izuku uttered, surprised by his demeanor towards the controversy. Well, we shouldn't keep you from your own studying any longer, Momo noted to him, catching his attention. Oh, yeah, he agreed, standing up from his seat. Good luck, you guys, he said to the others, giving them a wave before leaving as well. Phew, Mina breathed out afterwards. I was turning more pink than I usually am, she admitted, fanning herself with her hands. I know, right? The invisible girl beside her concurred. I knew Midoriya was strong, but I didn't expect him to have a six-pack, she exclaimed as steam was emitting from her head. Hey, I have a six-pack, Denki pointed out, about to take his black shirt off. Knock it off, Kaminari, Kyoka yelled whilst blushing, jabbing her right earphone jack into his forehead. He shrieked in agony. Yeah, Momo, how did you not get flustered from him sitting next to you? The acid quirk user asked curiously, raising her eyebrow. Well, I am now, the class deputy responded as a tint of pink appeared on her cheeks. Man, Midoriya gets every girl's attention these days, Minoru complained. I mean, just look at Uraraka, he pointed out, causing the boys near him to turn and see the completely red face of the girl as she was trying to look at her notes. That's nothing compared to Dragneel, Hanta mentioned, gesturing towards the Dragon Slayer. Everyone looked and gasped to see a huge cloud of steam generating from her head as her skin had turned red in embarrassment. Hey, cool down, Nat, Rachel yelled as she held onto Rhea protectively. We don't need to turn the lounge into a sauna, she mentioned. Fortunately, Alice quickly went over and placed her left hand onto the girl's right shoulder, letting a cold aura waft off of her to steadily decrease her friend's temperature until she was stable. Huh, she breathed out afterwards. Thanks for that, she said in gratitude, sounding embarrassed. Guess Midoriya can really get a girl all hot and bothered, the pop-off quirk user complained, only to get stabbed in the neck by Kyoka's left earphone jack. Oh whoa, he screamed in agony. Now on with the lesson, the creation quirk user exclaimed excitedly. After a while of studying, everyone went back to their rooms to get ready for bed and do some last-minute memorization before the end of the night. I wonder why All Might never told me about widowmaker, Izuku wondered as he sauntered into his bedroom, picking up the lone dumbbell with his right hand and starting some curls. Guess she was another negative legacy he wanted to forget about. He realized inwardly, looking at the posters of the famed hero who had become his mentor. When he heard of his exploits as an Omni-Force squadron leader, he had expected incredible stories of his numerous adventures alongside his fellow members. Instead, the one that appeared to stand out the most, and was constantly talked about, was the disbandment of Overwatch, which led to the infamous assassin becoming a mercenary that went against everything the multiversal group stood for. After another curl, he put the weight down, going over to his desk and putting on a green shirt. He did not notice that outside upon one of the buildings beyond his dorm was a familiar figure readying what appeared to be a sniper rifle. Her lips curled into a grin as her infrared mask allowed her to see through the curtains to lock onto her target, who sat down in his seat and pulled out his hero notebook, which was his 12th edition. He opened it up and flipped through the pages, seeing the several names and powers of heroes he had jotted down, including the woman he had just been thinking about. Stopping to look at the page more closely, he noticed that he had written down his own questions. Who is she? And what happened to her? From what he learned today, it seemed as if the answers would not lead him anywhere. Adieu, symbol of peace. The female outside whispered aloud before pulling the trigger of her weapon, firing a sharp bullet aimed for the boy's head. Suddenly, a plume of flames arose just in time to incinerate it, causing everyone inside the dormitories to perk up instantly upon hearing the sound, including the messy-haired boy as he was the first to see the fire. Ah, the sniper gasped, frustrated that she had been foiled as she looked down to see Shoto Todoroki standing there dressed in a white shirt underneath a navy blue jacket and black sweatpants. Who are you? He asked loudly as fire flickered from the left side of his body. She merely turned away and appeared to jump off the building, making him grit his teeth angrily. Todoroki, a voice cried out, catching his attention as he looked to see Tenyer running up to him alongside Mizo, Ijiro, Momo, and Rachel. What's going on? He questioned to him immediately. Trouble, he responded as he blinked. I think someone's trying to. Look out, the masked teen yelled, tackling the half-cold, half-hot quirk user to the ground to avoid a flurry of bullets coming their way. The class representative ducked as well, while the other three shielded themselves, with the male hardening his arms to deflect the projectiles as the other two equipped metallic shields to defend against them. Once the bullets stopped coming, the group heard the sound of footsteps slowly approaching them, enticing them to all get into ready stances and onto their feet if they were down. Who is it? The Hagane girl asked, equipping a sword into her right hand in a flash of light. Meanwhile, Izuku, Ochako, Natalie, Alice, Rhea, Fumikage, and Suyu all ran outside to join their classmates upon hearing the noise, with the former of the group widening his eyes in fright to see who it was. Widowmaker, he uttered out, subconsciously closing his hands into fists as she came out into the light, revealing herself as the blue-skinned woman with the long ponytail and the slender figure in her outfit, holding the same weapon she had, which had morphed into a machine gun. She smiled at the sight of the freckled boy. "Now we'll do this the hard way," she stated in a cold and menacing tone, as everyone grimaced a little. X. A shadowy figure watched from atop the dormitory building as lights went on about each room in the one area. It was a man dressed in a black cloak, having metal boots up to his knees and armored hands with claw-like fingers. Shotgun pellets cases were upon both his belt, a brace around his neck. His dark hood was completed with a skull-like mask over his face, as he held a pair of twin shotguns in his hands. "Widowmaker, pull back," he said quietly, as if he was speaking through a communicator. Down below, the sniper herself heard his voice through an earpiece in her left ear, causing her to look away for a slight moment. "If you engage, Sombra might get compromised," his voice pointed out to her. Seeing that she was distracted for the moment, Shoto ignited his left arm and shot flames her way. However, she took notice just in time, firing her grappling hook to hit the part of the building to her right, reeling herself up to it to avoid the fire as she safely landed on the ledge. "I don't think these children will let me." "Reaper," she responded to her comrade. "Erg," he growled angrily from afar, aiming one of his weapons towards the group below. "Fine," he muttered. Just then, one of the ears Mizo had formed upon the tips of his tentacles twitched, causing him to perk up and look around. "Guys, there's someone else." "Og." He yelped loudly in pain as the group saw him get shot in the right shoulder, keeling over onto the ground. "Shoji!" Izuku cried out immediately as everyone else gasped in horror. Tenya was about to head over to him until the dark figure came down from the rooftop, landing safely on his feet as the dark mist of what was like a shadow wafted around him. He chuckled sinisterly as he readied both of his shotguns, while most of the people before him shivered in fright. However, Natalie just gritted her teeth angrily, taking a deep breath before launching a torrent of flames from her mouth, attempting to strike the mercenary that had just arrived. He somersaulted away, barely avoiding the fire as it gave the engine quirk user the opportunity he needed to pick up the masked teen by his left arm. "Someone needs to go get the teachers now," he demanded to his classmates as he extended out the exhaust pipes upon the back of his legs. "I'll go," Suyu declared with a croak, heading back inside the building. "I don't think so," Widowmaker muttered from afar, extending the barrel of her armament into a sniper rifle once more, letting her visor automatically come down over her eyes as she looked into its scope. She pulled the trigger, firing a sharp bullet that would strike the greenish-haired girl at the moment she hopped up to the entrance. However, Rachel jumped in the nick of time, using the shields she had brought forth to deflect the attack, allowing for her friend to escape. "Perfect," Reaper grumbled in frustration, putting his focus back onto the teens before him. "D!" a voice suddenly bellowed, causing him to turn his head too late as he was blasted back by an explosion from Katsuki, who grinned deviously as his foe slammed into a wall from the force. "Kakin!" the freckled teen exclaimed in surprise upon his arrival. "Midoriya, watch out!" Ijiro screamed, quickly getting in front of him and hardening his arms, crossing them to block a few more bullets that came from the sniper's weapon. "Alice!" Shoto cried out as he readied his right arm, letting ice form upon it. "On it!" The full-buster girl responded, slamming her palms against the ground to create a barrier of thick ice to surround her and her friends. The half-cold, half-hot quirk user did the same, barely blocking a bullet from Widowmaker as she let her visor come up, staring down at the barricade the students were behind. "Damn it, let me at him," Katsuki demanded, about to blast the wall apart. "Wait a sec, Bakugo," his spiky-haired friend called out, putting his left hand onto his shoulder. If you rush out there, you're gonna get killed, he pointed out seriously. It may not even matter in a few moments, Fumikage chimed in, catching their attentions as they saw parts of the ice wall on both sides starting to crack. What should we do? Rhea asked, activating her magic in a flash of light as her skin became a light cerulean, while she gained a ponytail, pony ears, and a pair of feathery wings. It's obvious that they're not going to back down, the red and white-haired teen realized as the cracks became larger. It's just like with the hero killer, he remembered, placing his hand against the barrier to reform the cracked parts to keep it up. Erg, Mizo grunted, catching the attentions of his friends as they saw that his shoulder was still bleeding. We need to get Shoji away from this fight and keep everyone else out of it, Momo realized, seeing the cracks still forming on the barriers. Ida, can you get him inside the dorm if we give you cover? She inquired to the spectacled teen. Of course, he answered with a nod. I'll take Skullface, the explosion quirk user declared with a devilish smirk, as small bursts emitted from his sweat-ridden hands. Takoyami, you should go with him, the class deputy advised to the bird-headed teen, who nodded in agreement. I don't need a damn babysitter, Katsuki shouted back. But you'll need someone to give you some backup in case you get shot, Rachel retorted bluntly, letting her shields disappear in a flash of light before summoning forth a single sword in her right hand. I'll go, too, she stated. That means the rest of us will take care of Widowmaker, the hardening quirk user concurred, somewhat nervous about the prospect. I can try drawing her fire, Rhea offered, much to her girlfriend's surprise. Sweetie, no, she yelled to her. You'll get. Look, I'll get away from any of her shots as fast as I can, the equestrian magic user responded reassuringly. Don't worry, baby, she added with a wink, causing the Requip user to blush profusely before turning away with a cute smile. Get ready, Shoto advised as bits of the ice wall were starting to fall apart. Tenya made sure he had a firm hold on Mizo as he looked over at the opening to the building, letting his legs rev with energy. Momo brought forth a staff-like weapon from the skin of her right arm. Ijiro hardened his face and arms, and Ochako touched a few of the larger ice pieces with her fingertips, making them float above her. Izuku was still overwhelmed by the situation at hand, but realized that there was a lot at stake if he and the others were going to hold out long enough for the teachers to arrive. One for all, he began inwardly, letting red lines of energy streak along his face and arms, spreading throughout the rest of his body. Full cowling, he exclaimed as they disappeared, and green sparks of electricity began emitting from his form. Now, Alice cried out, just as the ice walls shattered on both sides. The class representative immediately dashed off towards the building with the Dupli Arms quirk user in hand hurriedly. Reaper was about to fire at him, but suddenly found himself knocked back by something. He growled and looked to see that it was Fumicage's dark shadow, who readied its arms as he was joined by Katsuki and Rachel. Meanwhile, plumes of fire were shot up to the roof where the sniper was, enticing her to immediately somersault away as they struck the ledge. HMPH, she scoffed in frustration, taking notice of the half-rainbow-haired girl flying up above her. Her visor came up as she looked through her scope and fired a few more bullets towards her, but she quickly evaded them, giving the others the chance to run towards the building and out of her sight. We have to get her down here, Natalie shouted in a whisper, catching her comrades' attentions. How though? The creation quirk user asked, looking over to see the Requip user using her sword to block a shotgun pellet from their cloaked enemy. I think that's up to Rhea, Ochako realized, grimacing worriedly for her flying friend. As Widowmaker continued to fire at her, Izuku took note of one of the courtyard's corners, widening his eyes as he thought of an idea. On impulse, he ran towards it to the surprise of the others. Midoriya, Shoto yelled, about to go after him until he saw him jump onto the wall, hopping quickly up the edifice from one side to another of the corner. At that moment, the cold-skinned sniper steadied herself as she had a clear target of her airborne foe. Too easy, she uttered, ready to pull the trigger. Just then, the freckled teen hopped into the air, heading for her as he gritted his teeth and prepared his right leg. Smash! He bellowed, catching her attention as she immediately jumped off of the roof over the ledge, avoiding his kick as it cracked the ground it struck, creating a flurry of dust. She then fired her grappling hook to latch onto the side of the building, allowing her to safely land down in front of the opposing students on her feet, looking to see them there. Heads up! The half-cold, half-hot quirk user yelled, seeing her shift her weapon's barrel into that of an assault rifle. She fired it off rapidly, only for her bullets to be blocked by another ice wall that Alice quickly formed to protect her friends as she pressed her palm against the ground to create it. Now release! The pink-cheeked girl exclaimed, putting the tips of her fingers together to create a small flash of pink light. The sniper suddenly felt something hit her shoulder, followed by glancing up to see pieces of ice raining down onto her. "Let's get her!" Ijiro yelled excitedly upon seeing an opening, jumping out from behind the ice wall. "Careful," Momo advised as she ran after him. The makeshift hailstorm had stopped, but it appeared to be too late for Widowmaker as the pair ran up to her. The male of the two swiped at her first, having hardened his hands to be like claws. She narrowly avoided his attempts before having to duck away from the class deputy's created staff, having to step back. "Ha!" The creation quirk yelled as she was about to strike her shoulder with the weapon. However, she grabbed it with her right hand, much to her shock as she looked to see the smirk on the mercenary's face. "Such a sweet, foolish girl," she remarked mockingly. Before the hardening quirk user could attack her again, the sound of a loud bang echoed, being her gun as she had shot the girl in front of her. "Ah," she uttered, looking down to see the blood spreading on her light red shirt from her new wound. "Yairazu!" Shoto screamed upon seeing her fall onto her knees and let go of her staff, which her enemy tossed aside. Before she could attempt to shoot at her again, though, the spiky, red-haired teen jumped in front of her, hardening most of his body to shield her from the flurry of bullets that were fired. "Go get her out of there," Alice cried out, enticing Ochako to immediately run out to her. The half-cold, half-hot quirk user was frozen in shock for a moment, but quickly shook his head to regain himself and rushed out to help get the class deputy away by holding her arms, moving her towards another corner of the courtyard. "Crap, they got Momo," Rachel noted as she looked back at her friends. "Worry about that later," Fumikage advised, sweating nervously as Dark Shadow was struggling to hold back the shotgun pellets shot from Reaper's weapons. "Sombra, are you done yet?" he asked, apparently looking as if he had a communicator within his mask, causing his foes to perk up in surprise. "Almost done," a feminine voice with a Spanish accent replied over communication. "Though this would be easier if Widowmaker hadn't blown our cover," she mentioned in a snarky tone as a complaint. "It was part of the job, Sombra," the sniper retorted into her own earpiece. Suddenly, she pulled the trigger and felt no opposing force, realizing that she had run out of ammo. "Fire Dragon," a familiar voice began to echo, causing her to gasp to see Natalie about to come down onto her with both of her arms billowing with flames. "Wing attack," she screamed, throwing them down. Narrowly somersaulting away to avoid the attack, the mercenary quickly reached into her holster and pulled out another set of ammo, discharging the empty one from the rifle to insert it quickly. "I don't think so," Ijiro yelled, jumping in to attack her again. As the fighting raged on, inside the lounge of the dormitory, Toru and Mashiro were wrapping bandages around Mizo's bleeding shoulder as the rest of the class was there. "Sounds like a war zone outside," Minoru noted, shivering in fright from the noises of gunshots outside. "Why the hell aren't any of the teachers here yet?" he shrieked in question, on the verge of tears. "Asui's getting to them right now," Tenure responded reassuringly. "I bet Mr. Snipe could take the two of them down," he pointed out. "Erg," the duply arms quirk user grunted, catching everyone's attention as he sat up straight in the chair he was in. "There's a third one," he breathed out, causing them to all widen their eyes in surprise. What? Where? Kyoka asked quickly and frantically. I can't tell, he responded as blood dripped from his bandages. It might be the reason they got in here, unnoticed, he noted, making the class representative perk up. That's right, he inwardly realized, placing his hand onto his chin in thought. The alarms should have gone off the moment they walked into the UA facility, he said to himself, wondering if the mentioned third person had somehow disabled the school's security system. Hey, look at that! Denki cried out, making everyone glance outside the windows to see the fighting still going on. Both Katsuki and Fumikage were attempting to close in on Reaper as Dark Shadow continued to cover for them, blocking the pellets that were fired their way. Before he could shoot another, a sword flew in and struck the shotgun in his right hand, breaking it as it fell to the ground in pieces. GRR, he growled, ready to fire his other one until the explosion quirk user jumped in and blasted it out of his hand in an instant. Great, the mercenary muttered as the 3 students surrounded him. What now, Skullface? The spiky-haired teen asked mockingly as small explosions emitted from the palms of his hands, while Rachel brought forth a new pair of katanas in a flash of light. Letting a black mist suddenly waft around his form, their enemy chuckled, reaching into his cloak to pull out a new pair of shotguns to the shock of those in front of him. You shouldn't have asked that, he remarked sinisterly. Get down, Tenya yelled inside the building upon noticing, causing everyone to perk up in surprise. All of a sudden, shotgun pellets shattered the windows and flew right towards them. Most of them ducked away in time, but a pair of shouts were heard as the shots kept sounding off outside. The masked man was firing his weapons at a breakneck speed, while the black mist shrouded his form from view. Everyone, even his comrade, had to lower themselves to avoid the attack. Huh, she breathed out afterwards as she got up. Idiot, she muttered, looking back at her foes as Natalie and Ijiro stood to oppose her still. Back inside the dormitory, Mina grunted as she pushed herself off of the floor, opening her eyes and then widening them in fright to see spots of blood. She then looked up to see who was in front of her, being Rikito as he held his bleeding left hip in pain. Gee guys, he stuttered out, keeling over as he had to place his hand against the floor to keep himself up. Sato got shot, the acid quirk user shrieked to her friends. Erg, Denki's voice grunted, catching their attentions as they saw that he too had been hit in his right arm. Is everyone else okay? He blurted out, starting to fall over. Kyoka immediately went over to catch him, shivering in fright as she and almost everyone else were teary-eyed out of fear. Stupid kids, Reaper muttered as he finished his assault, dropping his empty shotguns onto the ground. He had also taken out the lampposts, darkening the area. With that, Dark Shadow began to grow exponentially larger, much to Fumicage's fright. Dark Shadow, no, he demanded, trying desperately to retract him before he could potentially kill the man in front of them. However, someone else was already prepared to launch an attack, much to the mercenary's shock as he saw Katsuki standing in front of him, readying his hands. Stun grenade, he shouted, creating a sphere of light within his hands, which then imploded to create a large explosion with a blinding luminosity. His target got blown back into a wall, while the dark materialized form began to shrink, allowing for its user to return it to his body. Huh, he sighed in relief. Thank you for that, Bakugo, he said in gratitude to the spiky-haired teen, whose hands steamed with smoke. Shut up, he responded. I was only trying to get Skullface there, he stated, causing him to blink in surprise, while Rachel just groaned. Meanwhile, Natalie attempted to land a kick on Widowmaker, only to miss as she slid away and was about to fire on her. Unfortunately, her chance to do so was thwarted as Ijiro tried to slash at her with his claw-like hands. She dodged that as well, taking note of the fact that her partner was incapacitated for the moment, as the students who fought him were now ready to join the others against her. Just then, she saw a shadow come over her, looking up to see Izuku being carried by his right arm by Rhea, flying overhead until she tossed him towards her. Smash! He yelled, attempting to strike her with his right foot. She somersaulted away, however, as his kick cracked the ground he struck. As she got onto her feet, though, she looked to see that she was being surrounded by all the students in the courtyard. Alice went to join them with Shoto, while Ochako stayed by Momo's side. All of a sudden, the sniper began to chuckle, looking over at the freckled teen as a serious countenance came across his face. "You really want to be him, don't you?" she guessed, much to his surprise as he immediately understood what she meant. "What do you want?" the Dragon Slayer asked in a threatening tone, igniting both of her fists in flames. "Well, if it isn't the dragon," the mercenary noted upon spotting her, "and the knight, the Pegasus, and the Ice Woman," she listed off upon seeing the multiversal girls among them, as they perked up in surprise as well. "Hey, widow bitch," the explosion quirk user remarked, catching her attention as she looked over at him. "There's 9 of us and only 1 of you," he pointed out with a smirk. "HMPH," she scoffed, letting off her own grin as she noticed Reaper starting to get up, pulling out a single shotgun. "I think this party is over," she stated, much to their confusion. "Og!" Katsuki suddenly yelped loudly as he was shot in the back of his right arm by the masked man. "Kaken!" Izuku screamed, while the others were ready to attack Widowmaker. However, she dropped an object onto the ground, which latched into it like a spider as a purple gas was within a glass cylinder that rotated upon it. The freckled teen gasped in shock upon realizing what it was. "Move," he cried out, jumping away. It burst into a cloud of purple smoke that spread over the entire courtyard, allowing for the sniper to run over to her comrade, having a rebreather in her mouth as she shot her grappling hook to hit the ledge of the roof, taking hold of his hand before reeling herself up with him. "What is this?" Natalie asked, muffled as she had her mouth covered with both of her hands. "Don't breathe it in," Alice advised, struggling to hold her own breath. Suddenly, though, everyone could feel something sucking away all the gas, looking over to see it get taken away from the area, allowing them to breathe again. As the 2 mercenaries looked on from the rooftop, the female smirked to see that was 13 who had vacuumed away the poisonous gas into the open right index finger of his suit, standing beside Snipe, Cementos, Midnight, and Principal Nezu. Tsuyu was among them as she was helping Recovery Girl tend to Mizo, Rikido, and Denki. "Bakugo, you okay?" Ijiro called out, rushing over to his friend as he stood back up firmly with a grunt, still bleeding. "Yeah, I'm fine," he replied, breathing angrily with clenched teeth. Arriving on the scene was were Shota Aizawa and All Might, who widened their eyes at the sight of the damage done as all the gas had been sucked away, with the space hero flipping the cap to his finger closed. "The hell happened here?" the former muttered in question. The latter glanced up towards the roof and let his mouth hang open in astonishment. "Widowmaker," he stuttered out of disbelief, shaking a little. Upon the rooftop, another figure joined the pair, being a young woman with brown skin and a distinct curved hairstyle parted to her right with light violet tips, while the other half was somewhat shaven with what appeared to be cybernetic attachments. Her outfit consisted of a short-sleeved black jacket with a large collar and included a belt that appeared to have grenades upon it. Another distinct feature she had was that her arms and legs were covered by a cybernetic, purple armor that had numbers and coding appearing all over them. She donned black, fingerless gloves over her claw-like hands and violet mascara upon her eyelids with a pair of black earrings. She curled her purple lips into a grin upon seeing the sights below. "Well, looks like you had all the fun," she remarked, placing her hands at her hips. "Did you get the data?" Reaper asked, ignoring what she said. "All of it," Sombra replied. "It was a bit tricky to hack the system," she admitted somewhat sheepishly. "But I guess since their security couldn't stop me," she continued in a snarky tone. "Why with their firewalls?" she questioned rhetorically, letting out a chuckle. The masked man just growled and walked past her. "Let's go," he advised, causing her to arch an eyebrow. "What about your other job?" she asked, gesturing down below. Widowmaker stared down at Izuku, also noticing All Might as well. Not tonight, she responded, setting her weapon onto her back. We'll get that done another time, she stated, taking out her MPG from her holster. In the courtyard, everyone saw a bright green flash of light emerge from the rooftop, causing them to all perk up in surprise. Rhea flew up to see what it was, being a portal that disappeared moments after she discovered it. They got away, Alice realized slowly. The green sparks then disappeared from the freckled teen's body as he closed his hands into fists out of frustration. Yaoyorozu, Shoto exclaimed, quickly running back over to her and Ochako. Recovery Girl soon came over to help assist getting the creation quirk user to her office, along with all of the others who had been shot from the attack. Katsuki was prepared to go on his own, but Ijiro helped him despite the fact he tried to plead that he was fine. Deku, Natalie uttered, catching her close friend's attention as he saw her walk up to him. You doing okay? She asked, letting the flames on her extremities go out before taking hold of his right one. I don't know, he confessed in reply, as it seemed like too much of a coincidence that the woman they had talked about in class had just attacked them. He then glanced over and shared a look with his mentor, who stared back at him seriously. The animosity in the air was thick, as was the blood that stained the courtyard ground and the lounge floor. After about 10 minutes had gone by, the teachers had helped get the injured students to Recovery Girl's office, setting them down onto beds as they were still pained from the bullets they had been struck by. The rest of Class 1 was advised to wait in the dormitory lobby, where most of them were still shaken up from the events that conspired. Shoto, Ijiro, and Alice had mysteriously disappeared from the group as they sat around silently, not saying a single word. Can you believe this? Rhea questioned, causing everyone to perk up as they had heard her. I mean, we were just talking about this in class, and… Sweetie, it's over now, her girlfriend interjected, embracing her lovingly as she was somewhat shaken from what happened herself. We're okay, she added in a reassuring manner. What was she and that other guy even after? Mushiro asked, getting the others' attentions. Who knows? Tennya responded, folding his arms over his chest. Perhaps the teachers will figure it out, he concurred, narrowing his eyes. How are they going to explain all this to the media? Toru wondered. If they do, they'll be in hot water again, Fumikage replied as he leaned against the wall beside some bits of shattered glass still on the floor. A cover-up might not be that easy, Suyu mentioned, while putting her right index finger up to her cheek. Plus, there's all the other students here on the grounds that heard the attack, she pointed out worriedly. This is becoming a maddening problem, the Dark Shadow Quirk user commented. The teachers should find a way to handle everything, Minoru chimed, folding his arms behind his head as he sat upon the plush surface of the couch. They handled that whole mess with Bakugo pretty well, didn't they? He inquired to the group. Yeah, but… Mina tried to reply, only to stop as she saw Ijiro jog into the room. Sorry I took off, you guys, he apologized. Bakugo was trying to convince me he was fine and… His sentence was stopped at the moment the pink-skinned girl ran up and hugged him comfortingly, struggling to hold in her sobs as her lips were quivering. He was admittedly surprised at first, but gave way and hugged her back. In the meantime, Izuku let his fists tremble out of frustration as he sat down on the couch, wondering why this incident had happened. Shota sighed from elsewhere, standing outside the nurse's office with Midnight, Present Mike, Snipe, 13, All Might, and Nezu. Recovery Girl has said that the bullets didn't penetrate any vital organs for any of the students, the female of the group told the others, causing most of them to breathe out sighs of relief. We need to put the whole school on lockdown, the homing quirk user stated suddenly, catching their attentions. And cause another panic, the famed space hero exclaimed in response. No way, he argued with a wave of his right arm. Now. The former professional repeated, getting in between the two. We need to think this over for a moment, he advised. The media will be all over our ass again if word of this gets out, the unkempt teacher added, folding his arms over his chest. Might have something to do with that traitor in our midst, the voice quirk user muttered, catching the attention of the woman standing near him. Are you still on about that? She asked threateningly, grabbing him by his leather jacket as he yelped in surprise. There's no proof any of the students brought those mercenaries here, she shouted. See, calm down, Kayama, Toshinori stammered, evidently conflicted as to what he should do with tensions building to his left and right. That's quite enough, everyone. The high-specs quirk user suddenly shouted, causing everyone to immediately silence themselves and turn their attention onto him. Now, he began, clearing his throat. I think the first thing we need to do is to reassure the students of their safety, he stated calmly. I know this may seem difficult, he admitted, glancing down at the floor. But they need someone to let them know that things will be all right since the threat has passed, he finished. I'll go, the man known as Eraserhead responded, trotting off. Besides, once they hear that their classmates are going to be okay, they'll be glad that it wasn't worse, he mentioned. Sure knows how to lighten the mood, Mike grumbled, earning himself an elbowing from midnight. As for Widowmaker, I have a feeling her attack on the students was merely a diversion, the principal noted, causing the others to perk up in surprise, especially All Might. What do you mean, sir? He stammered in question. I had Cementos check the data storage unit in the lower levels of the facility. The mouse-like man replied with his arms behind his back. Power loader was there as well, he mentioned, taking something out from his pocket. Someone hacked into our systems, he said, holding out a USB drive. The former professional hero narrowed his eyes onto it, noticing the purple skull upon it in a festive, Mexican-like design. Sombra, he muttered in realization. It seems Talon is making a move against Yua High, the high-specs quirk user concluded, putting the storage device back into the pocket of his vest. Therefore, we should be on high alert in case they return, he declared. Yes, sir, everyone else agreed. The skinny man in the hall stayed behind as his fellow faculty members trotted off, clenching his fists in frustration. I need to find young Midoriya, he told himself, walking away in the opposite direction. Back in the dormitory lounge, silence was prevalent as Izuku clutched his knees with a contorted expression upon his face. Deku, Ochako's voice chimed in, causing him to perk up and see her and Natalie in front of him. Are you okay? She asked him worriedly. He hummed as he glanced back down. I don't know exactly. He slowly confessed. This was different than the training camp, he mentioned, catching the attentions of the others as they looked over at him. Those guys, they were ready to kill anyone that stood in their way, he managed to say, gritting his teeth in frustration. Shoji, Yaoyorozu, Sato, Kaminari, and Kakin, he listed off. I wish we could have. There's nothing you could have done in a situation like that, their teacher interrupted, causing the students to all turn and see him approach. Mr. Aizawa, Tenya exclaimed as he quickly ran over. Are Bakugo and the others all right? He asked immediately in concern. Relax, they'll all be fine, he reassured as a response, causing the others to all breathe out sighs of relief. Once the bullets are removed from their bodies, Recovery Girl shouldn't have any problem healing their wounds, he told them. That's good news, Kyoka noted, sounding overwhelmed as well by all that was happening. Mr. Aizawa, Tsuyu chimed in, catching the attention of the erasure quirk user. What's going to happen with classes tomorrow? She asked out of concern. Obviously, there'll be none until we can figure this whole situation out, he replied, stuffing his hands into his pockets. Besides, I'm sure a lot of you are still a little scared from what went down, he mentioned as they all grimaced slightly. Get some rest for tomorrow, and we'll to pick things up the day after, he advised, starting to trot off. And no word about this to anyone, he added, much to their shock as their eyes widened. We've already had enough problems as of late, he grumbled as he headed out. Guess that means we're good, right? Ijo questioned to his classmates, who were still silent in astonishment from their teacher's words. Come on, Natalie beckoned, getting their attentions. Let's get to bed and remember that our friends are going to be okay, she mentioned, waving for them to follow her. Nat, Rachel uttered, surprised by her demeanor. However, she and most of the others went off soon afterwards, leaving only Tenya, Ochako, and Izuku behind. We should try to get some sleep, the former of the trio concurred, glancing over at the unkempt-haired boy near him. His expression still showed apparent frustration, making him blink in surprise. Deku. The girl there uttered worriedly, having noticed as well. What neither of them did see was that the Dragon Slayer had stopped her trek to look back at them, evidently concerned for her rival as she frowned. Young Midoriya? A familiar voice chimed in, causing them to all perk up as they saw All Might walk into the lounge. All Might? His successor stuttered in surprise. What are you? He interjected himself as he saw the man raise his right hand, enticing him to stop talking for a moment. I need to speak with you in private, he stated, much to his and the others' surprise. Episode I Part Roman 2. Huh? Momo uttered as she awoke groggily, moving her head slightly to notice that she was in the nurse's office upon a soft divan. What happened? She yelped in pain as she tried to sit up, grimacing with clenched teeth. Now lie down, dearie, the voice of Recovery Girl advised, catching her attention as she saw her approach. That wound you got was a real pain to take care of compared to the others, she mentioned. Oh, others? The creation quirk user stuttered in confusion, glancing around to see the sleeping forms of Mizo, Rikido, and Denki all in their own beds. Oh no, she uttered, frustrated as she bit her bottom lip. Take it easy, Yaoyorozu, another voice chimed in, making her perk up as she saw Shoto approach her with a cup of water in hand. You're all going to be fine, he promised, giving her the drink. Thank you, Todoroki, she responded in gratitude, taking a sip. She then took notice of the bandage over her abdomen as her shirt was pulled up slightly, seeing that it was still stained and red. Why hasn't my wound been healed yet? She asked curiously. After such a late night, I'm sure all of you are still tuckered out, the practitioner pointed out as she approached her. I had to surgically remove the bullets from you before I could even think of healing your wounds, she explained, taking hold of a metal tray off of a small table and showing it to her. Within it were 4 bullets that were red with blood, including the sharp one she had been hit by. And the villains? She continued out of curiosity. Gone, the half-cold, half-hot quirk user responded, looking over at his injured classmates. It seems as if they had a different objective aside from attacking us as a distraction, he mentioned while narrowing his eyes. Todoroki, the class deputy uttered worriedly, seeing the apparent frustration on his face. Now lie down and rest, the old woman demanded. I'll take care of your wound and the others first thing in the morning, all right? She told the ponytailed girl. Yeah, she responded with a simple nod, setting herself down onto the pillow. Todoroki, she said, catching her friend's attention as he saw her smile at him. Thanks for protecting us back there, she stated in gratitude. He was somewhat astonished by her words, knowing that she had been injured, while he stayed behind and watched it happen. Yaoyorozu, he uttered, while his fists trembled for a moment. He then went over and took the cup from her hand, setting it onto the table. Afterwards, he grasped her extremity with his own, caressing it by using his fingers and making her blush a bright red. I promise, we'll get those guys back for what they did, he declared, making her eyes shake out of surprise. Why, yeah, she stammered in agreement. He then let go of her, heading out as he slid the door open and went through it. She closed her eyes once he had left, sighing deeply and somewhat lovingly. Just take the damn thing out already, Katsuki's voice boomed from afar, causing her and her injured classmates to all immediately jerk open their eyes, shocked by the noise. In a separate area of the office at another bed, Alice was tending to the wound he received upon his arm. carefully forming a small tendril of water from her fingers that was aimed towards the opening as she kneeled in front of him. "Hurry the hell up," the explosion quirk user demanded angrily, making her flinch suddenly. "I can't keep waiting around like this for you to take out one stupid bullet," he yelled. "Mind yourself, Katsuki," the water and ice mage shouted back as a retort. "I'm not exactly a surgeon, let alone recovery girl for that matter," she mentioned with a roll of her eyes. "I don't care who you are if you can get the thing out," he roared. "So just do it," he commanded as a fierce look was in his eyes. "Don't you at least want some anesthetic first?" The fullbuster girl inquired out of concern. "Are you deaf?" he questioned back rhetorically. "I said get the thing before he could yell another word. His classmate plunged her tendril into his wound and instantly pulled out the bullet lodged within it. "Ah!" he screamed in agony, shaking as the girl carefully dropped the ammunition into a metal tray with the sound of a plink. "Huh," she breathed out in relief and exasperation. A few moments later, she was stitching up his wound with a few more watery tendrils from her right hand, while using her left to cool his arm. His expression was much calmer than earlier, looking over at the girl as she continued to sew his skin together. After one last stitch, she cut the string by forming her index finger into a sharp claw of ice, slicing it off. Finally, the spiky-haired teen muttered, lifting his arm slightly until it was grabbed by the girl next to him, enticing to glare over at her. "You'll still need bandages," she noted, making him scoff angrily. As she reformed her hands and went over to the cabinets beside the divan to find a roll of gauze, he stared over at her, taking notice of the fact that she merely had on a sports bra and sweatpants with a pair of sneakers over her bare feet. "Here we are," she said once she found the bandages, going back over to her classmate. "Going commando again, huh?" he inquired to her with a somewhat devious smirk, causing her to suddenly gasp and blush. Shut up," she whispered in a stutter to him angrily. "You can be just as bad as Minoru sometimes," she muttered out of frustration, wrapping the bandages around his arm. "It's a stupid habit, right?" he guessed, making her perk up in surprise. "Just like jumping in to save someone's dumb ass," he grumbled as he glanced away. She merely smiled at the meaning behind his words, continuing to cover his arm. "Your tendencies aren't all that bad, Katsuki," she pointed out. "Aside from strength, you and Yang share restraint," she told him, causing him to arch an eyebrow. "When the hell have I ever held back?" he asked back as she chuckled. "With me for starters," she replied, making him suddenly blush in surprise. "And your classmate, too," she added, finishing her work as ripped off the bandage from the roll, using an adhesive strip of gauze to keep in together. "Even if you've had issues with them in the past, you pretty much acknowledge everyone now," she mentioned, placing her left hand onto his shoulder. "I think that shows how you've grown," she stated with a smile. Katsuki hummed, standing up from the bed and stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Yeah, whatever," he muttered, walking off. "Hey, where are you going?" Alice questioned out of concern. "You should try to get some rest," she advised seriously. "I'll worry about sleep after I talk to Deku," he responded, making her blink in surprise as she saw him leave the room. Silence filled the air as the teachers lounged as Izuku was upon a chair, sitting in front of his mentor at the coffee table as he was upon the couch. They stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, with the student clutching his pajama pants tightly. "All Might," he finally began, steeling himself as he took a deep breath. "You overheard what I told Tagata, didn't you?" he inquired to him. The former #1 hero remained stoic, narrowing his eyes slightly onto his successor. "I know that you said I was worthy of one for all," he continued, trembling as he bit his bottom lip. "It's just, he lost his quirk, and his mentor." He listed off, tearing up a little. "He had such a heavy burden from all that, so I've told you time and time again to stop being such a crybaby, haven't I?" The blonde and unkempt-haired man interrupted, making him perk up. I understood your feelings back then, he stated as he widened his eyes in disbelief. But young Tagata was right, he pointed out. You would have subjected yourself to a hardship worse than his, and wouldn't be the hero you're aiming to become, he explained, seeing his lips quiver. Just as he said, you were the hero who took down Chisaki and saved that girl, he added with a grin. As painstaking as it was to see Nightai on his deathbed, he kept going. Seeing him smile in the end was wonderful, he admitted, clenching his fists as they rested over his knees. But the freckled teen started to respond. I gave into my guilt and went behind your back, he noted, gritting his teeth. I don't have the right to be your successor for something like that, he choked out, letting a few tears fall from his eyes. Midoriya, it's not just one for all that you're worthy of, Toshinori pointed out, causing him to lift his head slightly. That resolve you had to save lives, to help people in need. He listed off to him. Why do you think young Tennyson decided to intern alongside you? He questioned, making him blink in surprise. During her fallout when meeting the top 3 seniors of UA, Rhea had chosen to pursue the same path as Izuku and work with him at the office of All Might's former sidekick. It had sometimes crossed his mind as to why she was there rather than somewhere else. She wanted to become the kind of hero people can depend on, he said as his tears were drying up. The kind that can fight on the front lines and give support to others, he added. You're an inspiration these days, Midoriya, his mentor stated as he gasped lightly. If it hadn't been for you, young Tennyson may have never found the courage to push herself further and grow, he explained to him. While also rekindling her personal relationships, he mentioned. You are the hero, Midoriya, he said with a smile. And I am proud of you, he added. Thanks, All Might. The freckled boy replied in gratitude, starting to stand up. Now to the issue at hand. The former professional hero suddenly began, causing him to stop out of surprise. Wait, issue at hand? He questioned to himself in confusion, sitting back down. I assume you have some questions for me about Widowmaker, right? The blonde-haired man asked, noticing him instantly tense up. Why, yeah, he stuttered in reply. For starters, he continued. Was she really ever an agent of Overwatch? He asked, sweating a little. No, she wasn't, the man answered. But she had been married to a head member of the task force, he mentioned, causing him to blink in surprise. Had been? He uttered out of confusion. Hold on, what does that mean? He asked, evidently perplexed. Huh. His mentor sighed, rubbing his right hand through his hair. I'll start from the beginning, he said, standing up and trotting over to the windows. Her real name is Emily Lacroix, he told him. She and I met over 13 years ago, back when the Omniforce was yet to be completed, he explained, scratching his right cheek with his index finger. At the time, I had only one member left to put onto my squadron, he continued. And Ben Tennyson was pressing for me to find someone quickly, he stated, much to his successor's surprise. So, you picked Widowmaker without thinking? He inquired to him with an arched eyebrow. Of course not, he responded loudly, sputtering blood at the same time as he turned to face him. I had learned about her history well before we met, he said. After we were better acquainted, she joined, he finished, looking back through the window at the night sky littered with clouds. Did the Overwatch agents on the Omniforce know about her? Izuku questioned uncuriously. At the time, no, All Might replied, putting his hands together behind his back. They assumed she was recovering and didn't see the need to check in on her, he explained. Plus, it seemed to them that she was just another Omniforce member hiding behind a mask, he added as the freckled teen tensed up again and clenched his fists. When did you learn the truth? He asked with a gulp. A moment of silence filled the air of the room as the former professional hero sighed deeply. Do you know of Overwatch's most precise sniper, Ana Amory? He inquired back, causing him to blink in surprise for a moment. Why, yeah, he stuttered as an answer. She was a former second-in-command who was said to be killed by a Talon agent during an operation to save hostages, he recalled. placing his hand onto his chin in thought before gasping with widened eyes. Don't tell me, he started to realize. Yes, it was Amelie, his mentor interjected as he simply nodded. After I found out, I decided that the best course of action was to confront her myself, he told him. But it led to me getting shot in my right arm as she escaped, he confessed, clenching both his fists and teeth. After that, I had gotten caught up with my battle against All for One, and was left weakened to the point of having to find someone to inherit my power, he explained. To think that she'd come back to attack you and the students, he growled angrily. All Might, his successor uttered with trembling eyes, somewhat shocked by his demeanor, but then developed a serious question as he recalled another question that had crossed his mind. What did you mean when you said she was recovering? He asked, making him perk up. Amelie had married a man named Gerard many years ago, he began to answer. He was an Overwatch agent spearheading operations against Talon, he explained, going over to him. Though they were unsuccessful in eliminating him at first, they decided to target Amelie instead to get to him, he told the teen, who shook a little out of astonishment. So that must mean Talon had, he started to realize, clutching his pajama pants. They turned her into a weapon for their own purposes, Toshinori stated, molding her through neural reconditioning, reprogramming, and suppressing her emotions. He listed off as he too was tensing up from speaking of her upbringing. 2 weeks after she was recovered from her kidnapping, she murdered her husband in his sleep, he told the student, whose eyes widened in disbelief. After that, she returned to Talon and became the emotionless assassin known as Widowmaker, he finished, glancing off to the side ashamedly. I wish I had known everything from the start, he confessed. That way, I could have put an end to this before it even happened, he stated, shaking a little. There was no way you could have known, right? His successor inquired as he stood up immediately. I mean, her MPG was made untraceable and, he tried to continue, stopping as he saw the former number 1 hero sit back down on the couch. Widowmaker placed a heavy burden on not just myself, but Overwatch as well, he noted, putting both of his hands against his head. Now it's become something I can no longer control, he added. And left up to me, Izuku chimed in, causing him to perk up slightly. Midoriya, All Might uttered. I can't let you bear my burdens, especially this one, he said firmly. But I'm your successor, the freckled teen shouted back in response, much to his surprise. And besides, he kept going, clenching his fists. The longer she's out there working for Talon, the more trouble the world, he continued, stopping for a second. The whole multiverse will be in, he exclaimed in correction. I've told you before that not every person in the world can be saved, his mentor replied, sounding despondent from the couch he sat upon. In the end, Widowmaker was my failure as both a squadron leader and as a hero, he stated in frustration, gritting his teeth. All Might, the greenish-haired teen uttered, astonished by his demeanor. Shut the door on your way out, he advised to him, enticing him to leave. As he walked up to the access and slid it open, he took one last look at Toshinori worriedly, seeing him remain quiet as he exited. Huh, he sighed after shutting the door behind him, glancing at the floor somberly. He's right, he inwardly realized, holding out his hands. If he wasn't able to stop her back then, what can I do? He wondered to himself, letting out another sigh. Deku, a familiar voice chimed in, causing him to perk up as he recognized it. He turned to see Katsuki trotting towards him, with an abnormally relaxed look upon his face. Keiken, he stammered in surprise, noticing the bandages over his right arm. Shouldn't you need a sling? He inquired to him. The stripper took out the damn bullet for me and got it all stitched up, so I don't need it, he responded, narrowing his eyes onto him. Besides, the old lady'll get it healed tomorrow, he mentioned. Oh, that's good, his rival noted as he nervously rubbed the back of his head. That bitch was after you, idiot, the explosion quirk user pointed out, making him perk up suddenly out of shock. What? He stuttered in question, thinking he had misheard him. Widow bitch was going to kill you, he replied bluntly, making him blink in astonishment. I don't think she was planning on doing that, he stuttered out as a response, glancing off to the side. It just seemed like she and Reaper were toying with us while someone else. Do you really think someone like her would act as a distraction? The spiky-haired teen rhetorically asked, interjecting his sentence. If she was really on All Might's team, then she probably knows about the power he has, he explained, causing Izuku to tense up in realization. Just thought I'd let you know since you'd probably be too stupid to figure it out, he finished, trotting off past him. Wait a sec, Kaken, he said, making him stop for a moment to look back at him. What would she even gain by killing me? He questioned as he turned to face his classmate. Probably a bounty or something, he answered, walking away. You better not get yourself killed if you want to get better than me, he advised seriously. Kaken, the freckled teen uttered, looking at his arms. Over his time at UA, he sustained several injuries, some worse than others as scars aligned his arms and his crooked right hand. Because of the power he received as a gift from his mentor, he was able to attend the school of his dreams, but it became a burden on himself as he kept breaking his bones to strive towards mastering control. Now the burden of his power was shifting towards his friends, as he remembered the ones who were shot earlier in the evening. If Kaken's right, then, he started to realize, developing a very somber expression upon his face. Excuse me, a feminine voice with a Swiss accent chimed in, catching his attention as he looked to see a woman approach him, dressed in a white lab coat over a dark turquoise turtleneck sweater, and a black dress skirt with dark stockings and high heels. Her hair was a light blonde in a messy ponytail, as it parted over the right side of her face. In her hands was what appeared to be a tablet as she leaned towards the aspiring hero. Would you happen to know where I could find All Might? She asked him. Oh, he's right in there, he stuttered in reply, pointing towards the sliding door beside them. Thank you, she responded in gratitude, heading over to it. As she did, Izuku stared at her in wonder. I feel like I know her from somewhere, he admitted to himself, disregarding it, though as he walked off into the hallway. The door to the teacher's lounge slid open, catching the attention of the former professional hero as he sighed deeply. Midoriya, please. Seems like you've been having quite a bit of trouble lately, Toshinori. The feminine voice interrupted, causing him to instantly perk up and widen his eyes to see the woman who had entered, letting his mouth gape open out of shock. Angela, he stammered, spurting out blood from his mouth. She giggled, taking a seat in front of him at the coffee table, crossing her legs as she set her tablet down onto the right one. I think it's time we talked about Amelie, she stated, making him tense up as he glanced down in frustration. Aizawa messaged you, didn't he? He guessed, letting his hands rest upon his knees. Don't blame your fellow faculty for making me bring this back up to you, the doctor retorted in reply. I only came because I knew you established a connection with her, she told him seriously, setting her device down onto the tabletop. Winston and I have been working on locating Talon's base of operations for weeks now. So it's telling that they've come here, she noted, to promote that insane ideology onto our world. The Omniforce squadron leader realized as he glanced down for a moment. Angela, you know I can't help you, he pointed out to her. And the same goes for Shota. I know, she added as a response. That's why I asked him if he could have his students come on a field trip of sorts with us, she told him, causing him to blink out of confusion. To your world? He inquired. Aren't you still in the middle of the second Omnic crisis out in Russia? He implied, making her glance away for a moment. And Overwatch is still disbanded from what I've gathered, he pointed out as he narrowed his eyes onto her. Winston made the recall and brought most, if not a few more faces back, she mentioned, pressing a few icons on the tablet to allow him access to the database of the task force's members upon the screen, as he lifted it off of the tabletop to view it. Lena, Jesse, Reinhardt. He started to list off, widening his eyes at the sight of a few specific names, Anna and Jack, he exclaimed in shock. But I thought they were. I can fill you in on all the details when you come back with us to headquarters, Angela interjected, making him perk up. We've rebuilt a new base in Switzerland, she pointed out, taking her device back from him. Angela, I'm not an Omniforce member anymore, he noted ashamedly. And even if I still was, what good would I be? He asked her. You could provide us insight into Amelie's mannerisms or tendencies before you discovered her true intentions, she explained as a reply, while he stood up from his seat. That way, we may be able to narrow down, she continued, only to stop as she saw him head towards the sliding door. This field trip, he started to question. Will the students be under Overwatch's care? He inquired. You have my word, the doctor answered as she simply nodded. We will do our best to make sure none of them get hurt, she added seriously. Good, All Might responded, leaving the room afterwards. A few moments later, he arrived at the roof of the main building, letting the wind sway through his unkempt and messy hair. I was always the kind of hero people could look up to when things were bleak, he muttered to himself, looking at the palms of his hands. Now that it's come to this, I don't know what I even can do, he admitted, clenching his teeth in frustration. Contemplating, Toshinori? A familiar voice chimed in, causing him to gasp in shock as he immediately recognized the accent. That wasn't like you in the past, she noted. He turned to see the infamous assassin there sitting atop the entryway back into the building. Amelie, he uttered, seeing her stand up and glance down at him with a smirk upon her face. Is Egghead that insistent on starting a war in another world? He questioned as he clenched his fists. HMPH, she scoffed, hopping down in front of him. Don't you think this world is in need of an evolution after you? She inquired to the former professional as she trotted around him. Powers that cultivate and grow like yours, she pointed out with a sly grin. They can grow even stronger through conflict and battle, she told him. That twisted ideology of Talon's is exactly why I fought with Overwatch against them, he retorted angrily. And yet, you could have defeated us had it not been for All for One, Widowmaker mentioned, making him grimace in realization as his extremities trembled. Well, you were bound to lose anyways, she concurred, pulling out her MPG from her holster. A war is going to start here, Toshinori, she stated as she activated the device, creating a green portal that formed in front of her. And your successor will be at its epicenter, she declared. Her words brought a look of disbelief onto the Omniforce squadron leader's face, making her smirk as she made her exit. Adieu, Sherry, she said in farewell, going into the vortex as it disappeared seconds later. Frustration, rage, and anguish were all apparent upon the face of the former professional hero, as he knew that his old colleague's group was now after the one he was cultivating. Midoriya, he uttered inwardly, trembling angrily as the stars continued to shine in the midnight sky. X. The next morning, the Wana students aside from Mizo, Momo, Rikido, and Denki were gathered just outside of their dormitory and dressed in their day clothes, standing together in front of their teacher. All right, listen up, he began to them. After last night's fiasco, today's a day off for all of you, he told the group as they listened carefully. You should stay on campus, he kept going. But if you'd like, you can head home so long as I know beforehand, he mentioned to them. Boy, this turned into a big mess, Gyro whispered to her classmates. It's bad enough that they have to cover for the school's sake, Mina added quietly with a somber expression upon her face. What's worse is that some of our classmates got caught in the crossfire, Mashiro pointed out, evidently frustrated as he clenched his right fist. As everyone was talking amongst each other about what to do, Izuku tensed up, still thinking of the implications of what Katsuki had told him. He glanced over to see him ignoring Hanta and Ijiro asking about his injury. Deku, Achako's voice chimed in, catching his attention as he turned to see her approach him. Are you going to be heading back home for the day? She wondered, pulling out her notebook. Cause, I could really use a study partner, she confessed with a sheepish grin and blush. Her friend took a moment to think, glancing down at the ground. If Kaken is right, then I shouldn't be here, he inwardly realized, developing a serious expression as he inhaled a deep breath through his nose. At least for today, he said to himself, exhaling. Sorry, Uraraka, he apologized to the girl near him, making her blink in surprise. I was planning on seeing my mom eventually, he continued, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. So what better day to go home than now, right? He inquired with a chuckle. Why, yeah, she agreed as she stuttered, seeing him walk over to Shota. The explosion quirk was among the other few that took notice as well, seeing the homeroom teacher give his student a nod in approval, allowing for him to go back into the building. Midori is gonna leave campus, Minoru questioned, blinking in confusion. He's the last person I'd expect to leave, he added with a scratch of his head. He does well on his own, so I'm sure there's no ill reason for him to go, Alice pointed out, narrowing her eyes a little. Although, it is rather odd, she admitted. He's probably just anxious about seeing his mom again, the zero-gravity quirk user mentioned. So, she kept going, turning to her classmates. Anyone free to help me study? She asked in a somewhat begging manner as her eyes sparkled. I'm sure I can lend a hand, Tenya responded, going up to her. Yeah, let's all study together like we did last night, Ijiro recommended, receiving several agreements from his classmates. In the meantime, Katsuki, Shoto, Rhea, Alice, and Natalie stared back at the dormitory, with the latter wondering what exactly her close friend was doing by leaving the school for the day off. A while passed before Izuku found himself seated on the train heading back home, checking his smartphone for the latest updates on hero activity, rather than be intrigued or even excited by any news. He was still lost in his guilt for what had happened last night. Everyone's gonna be okay, he noted through thought. It's for the best that I'm not there tonight, he added inwardly, looking out the window as the crowded transport sped towards the station. As the evening hours rolled in later that day, the remaining Class 1A students still on campus were gathered together in the lounge, all studying together as they were listing out the names of the Omniforce members in their notebooks, helping each other out when they were stuck. The explosion quirk user was not among them though, having gone to his room to rest after receiving treatment from Recovery Girl earlier. Once he woke up from his bed though, he grabbed his phone, tapping a few icons before putting it up to his ear, awaiting a response. Elsewhere in the city of Musutafu, the freckled teen had just arrived at the apartment building where his parent lived, about to head in until he felt something vibrate in his pocket. HM? He uttered in confusion, taking out his phone and tapping the answer icon. Hello? He greeted, perplexed as to who would possibly be calling him. You're a damn idiot, the voice of his rival responded, causing him to instantly tense up as he recognized him. KK Kaken, he stammered in shock. Why are you calling me? He questioned, sweating a little. Because you're leaving yourself wide open for those Talon bastards to find ya, the spiky-haired teen answered over the call. I get that you feel like crap, ya moron, he pointed out seriously to him, much to his surprise as he had never expected any show of concern from him. But we could kill that widow bitch and her skull-faced boyfriend if they came back to Yua, he told him. Kaken, he uttered, clenching his open left fist. I left tonight for exactly that reason, he stated. If Talon is after me, then I don't want anyone else getting involved, he explained, regaining his composure. That includes you, he added. TCH, Katsuki scoffed from the other end of the line. Well, don't go blaming me if you end up dead, he muttered, causing him to pale a little from the thought. With the press of the icon on his phone, the explosion quirk user ended the conversation, setting his phone down onto the dresser beside him as he sat up. Just then, he heard a knock at his door. Bakugo, you want to come study with us? The loud voice of Ijiro asked from outside the room. We're going to try and do a challenge to see who names the most Omniforce members, he exclaimed rather excitedly. All right. His classmate grumbled repeatedly as he got up, grabbing a notebook and a pencil. He was about to leave until he took one last glance at his phone, letting out a sigh before exiting. Izuku went up to the door of his family apartment, seeing his last name printed upon it. Been a while since I was here, he realized, knocking the access twice. It was then pulled open, revealing his mother there in a light pink sweater and a blue skirt. Izuku, she uttered in surprise with wide eyes, seeing him grin. Hey Mom, he greeted warmly. His parent teared up before embracing him with all her might, bawling up out of joy all the while. Later that evening, as the sun had completely set and the stars shined in the sky, the two greenish-haired family members were both enjoying pork cutlet bowls with sides of white rice at the dinner table. When I heard about you being a part of that rescue mission, you wouldn't believe how worried I got, the older of the two pointed out, catching her son's attention. I was worried that you'd end getting yourself hurt again, just like back at the training camp, she mentioned out of worry. Ha! The aspiring hero laughed in remembrance. Yeah, he agreed, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. But then you ended up saving that poor little girl, Inko exclaimed. Izuku, I'm so proud of the hero you're becoming, she added happily. Mom, if you keep saying that, you'll be my only fan, the freckled teen jokingly mentioned, causing them to both laugh. Once they both finished their dinner, the mother went ahead and started washing dishes, while the boy dried them up by rubbing them with a towel. Though it's only for a night, I'm glad to be back, he inwardly admitted, setting the dishes carefully down beside the sink after he had finished drying them. I'm gonna go study in my room, he told his parent, catching her attention as she saw him grab his bright yellow backpack and head towards the door with his name labeled upon a piece of All Might memorabilia. Oh, Izuku, she yelped, making him stop for a moment. I'm so sorry about what happened to your employer, she apologized, causing him to widen his eyes as he understood that she was talking about Night-Eye. It's fine, Mom, he responded reassuringly afterwards with a smile, going into his room. Inko blinked in surprise from his words before grinning herself, glad that her son was moving on well from the incident. Later on, as it grew dark outside and she had gone to bed, the aspiring hero was sitting at his desk with just the lamp on it illuminating the area, writing in his notebook furiously as he was listing down all of the Omni-Force members. He had gotten through all 6 squadrons without an error and was almost done with the 7th. Sora, Simon, Edward Elric, and Widowmaker, he listed off to himself, pausing as he finished writing the 70th member's name into his notebook. He then put his pencil down and turned the lamp off, heading over to his bed. I know the rest of the members' names by heart, he noted through thought. After her, there's Mercy. Then he stopped his inward train of thought as he widened his eyes in realization. That was her back at Yua last night, he recalled, unable to have recognized her appearance from before without her famous Valkyrie suit. Mr. Aizawa, or All Might, must have gotten in contact with her about the attack, he noted to himself, lying down upon his divan. Does that mean Overwatch members might be working with Yua? He wondered, shutting his eyes. I shouldn't overthink this, he concurred through his thoughts, letting out a long yawn before falling fast asleep. Late into the night, the freckled teen remained snoozing silently as a trail of drool left his lips. All of a sudden, a loud thud emanated from outside his room, causing him to instantly awaken as he heard it. Mom, he uttered, getting out of his bed and putting on his red sneakers. He also grabbed his green robe and let his arms go through the sleeves before opening his door, walking into the dark hallway. Hello, he stammered, walking into the living room to see no one in sight. He then saw that the sliding door out onto the veranda was open, narrowing his eyes onto it in suspicion. Did Mom forget to close it? He wondered inwardly, walking towards it. However, his eyes caught the presence of a figure lurking right at the door to his room in a squatted position, noticing the blue luminosity coming off of its chest. Hey! His yell was cut off when the figure suddenly sped over in a blue light, grabbing him and yanking him out of the apartment in an instant through the open veranda door. All the while, Inko was fast asleep in her own bed, having not heard a single sound. Ah! Her son shrieked loudly from outside as he could see himself moving so fast along the street his kidnapper had taken him down, being immersed in a blue light. Oh man, Kakin was right. He inwardly exclaimed in fright as he grimaced. I sure am glad I didn't stay at Yua, he admitted to himself. But now I've ended up right in Talon's clutches, he realized frightfully. However, he regained his composure, readying his left fist as a reddish energy built up throughout his body, much like blood vessels as they sparked with green electricity. He then swung his arm down and struck the person in the back. Whoa, she yelped, tumbling forward and dropping Izuku as he somersaulted over the pavement before coming to a stop. He quickly turned back to see the feminine figure with the light shining off of her chest stand back up, appearing to ready a pair of pulse pistols in her hands that came out from what looked like a set of armored compartments on her arms. Ah, he gasped, quickly dashing away as the person fired onto him rapidly, narrowly avoiding the shots as he ducked into an alleyway. Jumping from wall to wall, he landed upon the roof of one, hiding himself behind the door structure as he took the chance to catch his breath. Shoot, he muttered through thought. If I was careful enough, I would have made sure my phone was on me right now, he exclaimed inwardly, glancing around for any sight of his kidnapper. There's definitely gotta be Pro around on night patrol, he told himself, slowly sneaking around the structure in order not to be seen. Just then, though, his eyes caught a glimpse of a glint in the distance, seeing that it was an oncoming arrow heading right for him. He narrowly managed to roll away from it as its sharp head pierced into the floor. Arrows? He yelped in surprise, quickly glancing in the direction that the projectile had come from, not noticing anyone in sight. Must be another agent, he concurred to himself. That means they don't want anyone to mess this up, he realized. Found ya, love, an English-accented voice suddenly exclaimed, catching his attention as he saw the individual from before looming over him, rapidly descending onto the floor in a blue blur and readying her twin pistols. Because of the lack of light, the freckled teen could not make out who she really was, but he seemed to recognize her voice as he narrowed his eyes. However, he had no time to think about that as he leapt away before being potentially struck by the pulse shots of her weapons. He also had to evade more arrows being shot his way as he jumped from roof to roof. Oh man, there's no end to them, he inwardly noted as he slid to a stop, glancing back to see how far he had gotten from his foes. All of a sudden, he heard a loud bang sound off, followed by something pinging right near him. He glanced over and saw a bullet lodged into the floor, steaming as it had just made a hard impact. Now there's someone with a gun, too? He shrieked through his thoughts. Meanwhile, the woman pursuing leapt up to the top of a water tower in a streak of blue light, eyeing the aspiring hero. She was donning bright orange goggles with a brown leather pilot's jacket over a skin-tight, orange and yellow suit. Over her form was a device that had a blue light at its center, draped around her chest in a uniform fashion. She blew a strand of her spiky brown hair away from her face as she put her guns away, holding her right arm before herself. "You think now's a good time to let him know who we are?" she asked, appearing to be speaking into a communicator. "I don't think that's a good idea just yet," a man with a country accent answered through the line. From afar, he came out of the shadows of a building, standing upon the veranda. He had a cowboy-like appearance with a pair of pistols tucked into holders upon his belt with ammo, boots with spurs on the back, and a red poncho draped over his shoulders. He also had a cowboy hat over his brown hair, having a beard that shaped his face well. Taking the cigar in his mouth out with his metal, prosthetic left hand, he eyed Izuku as he was carefully observing his surroundings. "I'll give the kid a little warning shot," he declared, readying the pistol he had in his right hand. He fired off another bullet from it, catching the freckled teen's attention as immediately jumped away, sparking in green electricity still. However, he then saw a small, round-shaped object being flung his way, followed by it exploding in a bright flash of light. "Ah," he yelped in pain, blinded as he started to fall towards the ground, losing the sparks around his form. The woman on the water tower was about to react until she saw another figure closing in, catching him before he could strike earth below. Ha! The person laughed, catching his attention as he began to regain his vision, seeing who had caught him. It was a brawny man donning an empowered suit of metal armor, with the shape of a lion's head upon his left arm, while he held a giant hammer with rockets installed in the back in his right hand. "You all right, lad?" he asked the freckled teen, who also saw that he had a helmet on with arched proportions similar to a rhinoceros and an orange visor. "Ah," he gasped, leaping out of his arms and onto the pavement of the street aligned with lampposts. "Some pro has to have heard the commotion by now, right?" he questioned to himself, glancing around the area. "I hope at least a bystander called for help," he muttered inwardly. "Yield." The voice of a man with a Japanese accent bellowed, causing him to instantly turn and look to see the bow and arrow aimed his way from the person in the fire escape. He was dressed in a black gi with metallic parts over his legs and right arm. The left side of his upper body was exposed, revealing a long dragon tattoo extending from his chest down to his wrist. A quiver rested upon his back with more arrows as his black hair tied into a ponytail thanks to a decorative yellow bandana, having white sideburns as well. A black beard was upon his face with a small goatee as he narrowed his eyes onto the target. "Kiddo, I think you ought to listen," another voice chimed in, being the cowboy-like man from earlier as he trotted over onto the street. "He don't usually miss too much," he mentioned, tipping his hat up. "Erg," Izuku growled, clenching his fists tightly. "You talon jerks can do whatever you want with me," he started to say as he got into a ready stance. "But don't you dare hurt my friends again," he bellowed angrily. The three men stared at him indifferently, appearing to be unfazed by his words. "Enough," another voice chimed in, having a somewhat robotic Japanese accent, as well as it made everyone around perk up. Approaching them was a man who appeared to be dressed in a cybernetic suit as well, though slimmer as opposed to the other one. His helmet was equipped with a light green visor and a black bandana that waved behind it. The armor itself was mostly white with many light green parts upon his chest, torso, and shoulders. The freckled teen noticed a symbol upon the center of his chest, being the kanji for Bushin. Behind him rested two swords in their sheaths, one being a wakizashi at the back of his waist, while the other was a long katana. "Wait a sec," the aspiring hero started to realize, blinking in confusion. "Let us see if you really are the successor to All Might," the cybernetic ninja proclaimed, readying to draw his longer sword as he grasped its hilt, clicking a button to unlock it from its sheath. As he started to pull it out, a greenish energy began emitting off of the blade, which his foe could sense as he began to sweat a little. "Holy woe, I know what this is," he inwardly exclaimed, clenching his teeth. "Ryujin no Ken wo Kuri," his opponent bellowed, spinning his blade out as the bright green aura of a dragon appeared out of thin air. He lunged forward in an instant, having the creature follow as it appeared that he was about to strike Izuku. Despite the overwhelming and even frightening power against him, he did not yield, keeping his fists clenched as he reeled his right arm back. "Esmamash!" he screamed loudly, throwing his fist out quickly. A loud burst of wind blew throughout the street as the woman from earlier arrived onto the scene in another blue blur, racing up to stand beside the cowboy as the archer came down from his perch to be near them. "What'd I miss?" she asked quickly, observing what had happened before them. The hatted man beside just chuckled. "Kid just proved himself," he replied, pointing towards the scene. The U.S. student trembled in shock as his adversary's katana had narrowly missed his head, while his fist had almost reached his chest. The dragon-like energy from his attack had disappeared, as he stood down and returned his blade to its sheath, letting it lock in with a click. "Well done, Izuku Midoriya," he complimented to the unkempt-haired teen. "You really are the one deemed worthy of his power," he noted. "Why, you're he started to respond, stuttering as he was feeling faint from shock, beginning to fall over. Genjai, he uttered out, collapsing into the ninja's arms as he reached over to grab him before he could hit the ground. You think we overdid it a tad, loves? Tracer asked curiously, enticing Hanzo, Jesse, and Reinhardt to stare at her blankly in reply. Meanwhile, the younger Shimada hoisted the boy over his shoulder, turning back to his companions. Come, he beckoned, catching their attentions. We must deliver him to Dr. Ziegler and Winston quickly, he advised. They all nodded in agreement, following him as the clock struck midnight. X. Any sign of him? Ochako asked the next morning, dressed in her school uniform along with her other classmates in their classroom. Though they had been told beforehand by their teacher that the 4-shot students would still require some recovery time, they were very concerned at the fact that Izuku was nowhere to be found. I checked the dorms again, Ijiro chimed in, gesturing towards the sliding door of the area. Wherever he is, he's not there, he pointed out, concerned himself. It's unlike Midoriya to be so late usually, Tenya noted, placing his left hand onto his chin. I know, Alice agreed, chiming into the conversation. Even if he's stuck on the bullet train, he'd try to find other methods of getting here as quickly as he could, she explained. Allura, you lost your skirt again, Rachel said, catching the ice and water mage's attention, as she saw the Requip user holding up the article of clothing in her right hand out of Minoru's reach as he was trying to jump up and grab it. Ah, she shrieked with a reddening face. Excuse me, she stammered out of embarrassment, trotting over to her friend to reclaim her skirt, as the engine quirk user turned himself away in a gentlemanly manner. Natalie, why do you think Midoriya isn't here yet? Shoto asked the Dragon Slayer, who had her fists clenched over the desk as he stood by her. I don't know, she answered honestly, gritting her teeth as in front of them. Katsuki seemed to be just as frustrated. After what happened the night before, she started to imply. I wonder if… Morning, Shoto's voice interrupted as he entered the room, looking as raggedy as usual. Everyone take your seats, he told the students, as most of them sat down. Mr. Aizawa, the half-cold, half-hot quirk user said, getting his attention as walked up to the front of the room, noticing that he was still standing next to the Dragneel girl. Do you happen to know where Midoriya might be? He questioned, much to the surprise of the rest of the class as they turned over to look at him. I don't recall him ever being this late to a class if ever, he pointed out, sounding concerned. After a moment, the teacher let out a deep sigh, inciting the red and white-haired teen to head back towards his seat. Midoriya's already gotten an early start to the day, he told him and the others, causing them to all gasp in astonishment. That being said, you should all work on getting ready for today, too, he advised, taking out a remote from his pocket and pressing a button. The walls near him opened up, revealing the numbered suitcases inside. Put on your costumes and pack whatever clothes you'll need, he said to his students. You're going to be on a special field trip for this week, he finished, making them all widen their eyes. A new field trip? Rhea questioned, evidently confused as she scratched the back of her head. Don't we have a quiz today? He asked on. Rhea, shush, Toru whispered loudly. We're gonna out of the quiz, so why worry about it? She inquired somewhat angrily. I wonder where we're going, Tsuyu said, placing her right index finger onto her right cheek. Beats me, Hanta replied, folding his arms behind his head. Let's get our costumes on and find out, Rachel advised, getting up from her seat and trotting over to the racks of suitcases brought out for her and the others. A while later, the 19 students were dressed in their outfits, standing outside at the school parking lot. Hey, there's no bus, Mashiro pointed out, scratching his head. Where you're all going, you won't need one, the man known as Eraserhead pointed out, getting their attentions. This whole change in plans isn't just due to what happened the other night, he mentioned to them. We also want you to know the full history of the Omniforce firsthand from people other than myself and All Might, he explained. Just then, A green portal appeared right behind him, making everyone gasp in surprise. Whoa, Ijiro uttered in astonishment. Does this mean we're going to actually meet more Omniforce members like Ben Tennyson and Urza Scarlet? He asked excitedly. In a sense, yeah, Shota replied. But these heroes are more defined by the duties they carry out in their world, he added, making some of the students blink in confusion. They then saw a figure emerge from the vortex, walking over to stand beside the unkempt man. That guy, Natalie uttered, starting to realize who it was. The man that arrived had whitish blonde, messy hair, donning a blue, white, and red flak jacket with a number 76 imprinted upon the back. He had black and red gloves, black pants tucked into metallic boots, and several pieces of ammo and weaponry upon him. He also had a black mask to hide his face, having a red visor to see through. This man here is Jack Morrison, the teacher introduced, gesturing towards the man as he set his rifle down in a somewhat menacing manner, frightening some of the students as they stepped back. He's the commander of Overwatch, where you'll be going for the trip, he stated. Overwatch? The Dragon Slayer uttered out in shock, staring over in awe at who was apparently the task force's leader.